Welcome to a brand new episode of The Partial Historians. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Ed.
And I am Dr. G. And we are super excited to be here today because we're about to talk about 440 BCE.
I know, the speed of our progress is insane. I'm getting giddy.
From the foundations, and we're about, 300 something years in? We're doing pretty good.
I think so. I mean,
lightning
does
fast.
this look like 300 years have passed?
It does not. You look incredible.
Thank you. So, in the course of the history of Rome, Dr. G, let's do a brief recap of where we were up to last episode.
Yes.
Yeah, 441 was actually quite a...
Yeah, look, I don't remember much about it. Ardea was involved, and
we had just cleaned up the whole mess in Ardea.
There was a bit of a mess there.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I ran out of sources.
No,
so
but that's just it.
I really didn't have a lot to say.
There really wasn't much to say about 441. It was fairly...
It was a pretty minimal
peaceful.
year.
Yeah, exactly. After the drama that had happened with the border dispute in Ardea and that whole weird civil war that apparently broke out there over a hot Korean girl.
Wow.
I know. Anyway, so yes, it was good to have some peace and quiet. You know, your life can't be keeping up with the Kardashians 24/7.
It can't. Sometimes you got to go home.
Yeah. So that's really all I have to say about 441. So I think it's time to pause as we transition into 440 BC.
Oh, for people watching at home, that's because we're going to insert a sound effect later for the audio only. 440
Yes.
BCE.
Yeah.
Oh boy, do I have some news for you. We've got consuls this year.
Yes, because you might recall that it has been mooted that maybe we don't have consuls, that maybe we have military tribunes with consular authority, because then plebeians can technically hold the office without dirtying it up too much.
Technically.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We haven't seen much action from that side of things. It's mostly been consuls.
The gist that we're getting that's coming through from the source material is this is a time of uncertainty. There's a volatility in the politics.
Yeah.
So how that's exactly playing out, we're not really sure. And for me in particular, reading Dionysius of Halicarnassus is a bit of an issue because this is precisely the point where he starts to go missing. And I've only got some fragments to deal with.
Makes me very sad.
But we do have two consuls. The first of which, I'll test these names against you. We've got Proculus Geganius, son of we don't know who, grandson of we don't know who, Masserinus,
Check.
a patrician, and Titus Menenius Agrippa, Titus Menenius, son of Agrippa, grandson of Agrippa, Lanitas, or it might be Lucius Menenius. We're not sure about
Lucius is the version that Livy goes with, which means it must be the correct one.
Oh, I see.
But yes, apart from that, totally agree with you.
And I also have a record of somebody called the Aedile of the Plebs.
Ooh.
This role doesn't come up very often, or at least it's not spoken about very often in this early period.
Well, that's because we're not entirely sure it does exist at this point.
But be on the lookout for somebody called Manius Martius.
Yes, I also have that name. And let me tell you, Dr. G, if 441 was almost boringly peaceful, 440 is going to turn all of that around.
Drama. Bring on the drama.
I will bring on the drama.
We also have a Praefectus Annone.
Ooh. Okay.
Apparently. I don't know. This is what Broughton tells me. And this might go on for a couple of years. Hold that thought. Lucius Minucius Esquilinus or Gurinus.
Now, that's a name I do recall.
He used to be the consul Suffolk of 458.
Which is why I remember it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that year stands out.
Yeah.
Like a shining diamond.
Absolutely. All right, so be prepared, listeners. I can tell you right now that you have to be prepared for a year of many people dying.
Oh.
Lots of danger, sedition, famine, and the threat of a king.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think you and I are talking about different years.
I don't think so. Yeah, basically the only bad thing that didn't happen in this year, according to Livy, was a foreign war.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as far as I can tell from the sort of the fragmentary sources that I've read, the events of 440 and the events of 439 are probably going to mesh together in perhaps a way that we can't disentangle.
Bite your tongue. I'm dealing with an analytic source here.
Mine's missing, and everything that I know about the things you're saying right now come in the next year.
No, look, I think we've spoken before about the fact that it seems as though our sources often like to characterize years in certain ways, which means that sometimes they might be, tidying things up a bit because they're like, wouldn't it be just neater if everything happened in 440 rather than, trickling into January and February of the next year?
And we've also got that issue with, how do we date things precisely anyway?
Absolutely.
We know that the Fasti records that these analyst historians are going to much later are fragmentary themselves. At least they are for us. And we think that they might have been for them as well, because we do get these discrepancies that emerge along the way.
Yeah. So are you prepared to delve into this year with me?
I'm ready. I'm really keen to hear what you've got to tell me.
Okay. So if a foreign war had been added to the disasters that happened in this year, Livy thinks that it would have been a complete disaster for the Romans, even if the gods had been on their sides. That's telling you something. Even if the gods are rooting for you and on your side, and yet somehow you still fail, must be pretty bad.
But he says that's not what happened.
No, it isn't. I'm just trying to paint a picture of how terrible it is.
Okay.
Now, it all begins with a terrible famine, and can't really be 100% sure why the famine came about in the first place. There are a couple of theories, though. First of all, weather, climate, those things need to be taken care of, people. Otherwise, food shortages do arise.
You could also have a problematic thing that happens with the crop. Some sort of disease moves through it.
True.
These things are easier to manage in the modern world with our modern technology.
Yeah.
Not easy to manage in the ancient world. If a devastating sort of plague rips through the crop right before harvest, you got bad times ahead.
You do. But I wish you wouldn't embellish Livy this way, because he quite clearly says...
I'm just speaking about reasonable hypotheses about the ancient world.
It's the season.
It's the gods, I tell you.
Yeah, anywho, so it could just be a weather thing that just didn't help the crops grow, and there's an abundance that was needed. However, it could also be that people were neglecting their farming duties. Okay. This is a patrician read. Putting it back onto the plebeians and not doing their job properly. They've been hanging out in assemblies.
Ooh,
they found city life far too attractive. Not enough time on the farm, Dr. G.
I thought I'd brush off my socks and become a military tribune with consular power.
Dear Lucretia, I have been now for several weeks in the capital of our great nation, and I cannot put into words how truly magnificent Rome really is.
I've decided to go into politics.
Yeah, so of course the patricians are indeed upset with this situation because it's plebeian laziness that has brought this all around. However, the plebeians aren't just going to take this kind of criticism lying down. The tribune of the plebs comes in and accuses the consuls of dishonesty and carelessness. Yeah, so counter-accusation. Once again.
You guys have been sleeping on the top job.
Yeah. Either way, I think it's safe to say that both groups are pointing the finger at the other as to why this whole situation
is nobody is harvesting the grain.
Yeah. Once again, crops are being ignored while people argue. But the tribune of the plebs did eventually manage to get one Lucius Minucius appointed as prefect of the corn supply. And the Senate aren't against this because, hey, everybody's got to eat, no matter what your status is.
I think it's a sign of the times that something has gone terribly wrong, that they need a prefect just to look after the grain supply. There's issues here. And they're like, we need a tailored solution, and we need somebody in charge of coming up with that solution.
Yeah, so I hereby dub Lucius Minucius the Nacho King of ancient Rome. Now, as it turns out, he actually wasn't fantastic at his job.
I was going to say, he does practically nothing.
Well, okay, in terms of getting food, sure, but he does contribute something else, which is more important, Dr. G. he safeguards liberty. Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second. Now, just a little note here. Way back in the early Republic, and around sort of 490, 489, this guy's relatives were also consul when there was a famine.
Oh, yeah. That's an unfortunate family tradition.
Yeah, so I'm just going to throw it out there that there is actually a bit of a family connection here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are they all bad with grain?
Well, no, I think they actually
solved the famine.
Yeah, I think they actually did a reasonable job.
And this might explain why they've chosen Minucius then.
Potentially. And he's also had, his relatives have been fairly well known. They've established themselves. I mean, not always in great ways. One of them had to be bailed out by Coriolanus, but...
Oops.
Yeah, anyway. It doesn't matter. So Minucius, of course, does the logical thing in that he starts sending out bat signals. Help! We're in trouble. Come to our aid.
Shaped like sheaves of wheat.
That's right.
Ceres, aid us.
Across land and across the seas, he asks for aid. He manages to get a little bit of corn from Etruria, but a little bit isn't going to solve a crisis on this scale.
Asterisk, when we talk about corn, we're not talking about maize at this point in time.
No.
We're talking about all sorts of ancient grains, and they're all sort of classified under this idea of corn in the Roman mind.
Yeah, Nacho King is very misleading, I apologise, but I just like it. Anyway, so Minucius decides, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to take a number of other steps. First of all, I'm going to force all Romans to declare, well, Roman men, goes without saying, Roman men to declare how much corn that they had.
Tell me how much grain you got in there, buddy.
Yeah, what are you packing?
Shake it, shake it, shake it. It sounds like there's more grain.
What's in that storage over there? Oh, really? Your spare tokers? I don't think so.
Don't look in the barrel.
That's right. And they had to sell whatever they had in storage that was over a month's supply. So they were able to keep a month of what they had, but everything else had to be sold.
Okay, so we're into the rationing phase.
Yeah.
With the local supply.
This is a bad famine. I don't know if I've mentioned that.
It's getting worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, this part I don't like so much, but probably predictable. He also orders that a portion of corn be taken from slaves, so part of their daily ration is taken away.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. He also started charging dealers.
There's grain dealers?
Yes, there is.
Buddy, what do you want? What do you want? I got some.
Well, the thing is, it seems that people might obviously have been, I don't know, trying to benefit from this whole situation. Oh. Can you imagine?
Romans?
Yeah.
Trying to outdo other Romans?
Not even necessarily Romans. I mean, who knows who these dealers are. But yeah, it seems like people were potentially, I suppose profiteering might be the right word for it.
Sounds like.
People are really angry about this whole situation. So that's a good thing. However, none of these things really help with the incredible crisis that is the famine. Like obviously, small dent, but it's not really doing what needs to be done here. So it makes some plebeians so scared about what lies ahead in the future that apparently some are literally throwing themselves into the Tiber and committing suicide.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a bad famine.
Yeah, okay. It's just that because my source material is so different from yours at this point that I'm like, this is not even something I've encountered yet. I'm hearing this for the first time. Well, that is tragic.
There you go. So then steps into the void an equestrian man. Now, I should say right now that
with his horse.
Yeah, this is early Rome, so this isn't the kind of later version Rome equestrian where you qualify with like a certain amount of money as being part of the equestrian class. This is when you actually do probably have a horse.
Yeah, you're able to equip as a cavalryman.
Yes.
In times of war. Yeah,
exactly.
You're quite substantially wealthy.
Sure, but yeah, it's not like the Augustan version of an equestrian. No. Yeah, so just mentioning that. And this guy's name is Spurius Maelius. Now, he is a wealthy man, as you have highlighted, okay?
No, I'm going to have to jump in soon because you're definitely straying into what is 439 for me.
Well, I never. Okay, well, hear me out. Okay, because Maelius decides that he's going to use his money to do something useful. However, Livy highlights here that this set a terrible precedent for Rome and that this guy had awful motives for doing so.
Oh boy.
Again, shocking, I know, that a Roman would be out for himself. Yeah. So, Maelius decides to use his personal fortune to purchase corn from the Etrurians. And he's able to do this because he has apparently quite an extensive network of friends and clients. So, whilst this is obviously different to what we saw with the Fabians, this is another one of those incidents that really highlights for us how much there is this network of patronage that works throughout this society. And it means that you do actually have private families that have enough wealth sometimes to step in and do things for the state on this scale.
Yeah, and I think this tells you, I mean, this is the seeds of aristocracy in its most essential form, isn't it? And it's like, and you can see it in this early period of Rome, and we know that these people are all connected, and it's like the Romans do try to define themselves as different and separate, and we're like, we're a special people, but they're definitely taking in from the Latins, they're definitely taking in from the Etruscans. All of those surrounding peoples are peoples that they're connected with, they're either related to them, or they're good for business ties, and this kind of thing really hits home when it's a famine.
Yes, absolutely.
And this one guy's like, well, I've got enough money to do what the state cannot do, which is to buy up a grain supply for us.
The connections. Of course, this may have, made the problem worse because he's buying up the supply. However, what he does then is that he hands it out for free.
What?
I know. Now, I am getting close to 439, so just you hold it right there, Missy. Yeah. So, this, of course, makes him insanely popular with the plebs.
I can only imagine, because they're starving.
Yeah. So, they're literally following him around like puppies and being like, hey, Maelius, toss me another bit of that corn and I'll show you a good time.
I'd love to buy your bread.
Bake it in my oven.
Ooh.
This is getting gross. So this makes him feel very important, and he starts to dream a little dream, Dr. G.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Now, as someone who's an equestrian, as in wealthy enough to have a horse and all, that's well and good.
As well as to buy the grain.
Yeah, that's well and good. But aiming for the consulship? I don't think so.
Yes. No, an equestrian is not technically of the patriciate class, as far as anybody. So this might be a retrojection as well. So this is the other thing. We're not really sure what makes an equestrian in this early period.
No.
And it seems like anybody's best guess would be that there is a sort of blurring between equestrians and patricians, because patricians are this sort of elite class anyway, and it would make sense that they were also the wealthy enough to buy and look after their own horses.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there's some sort of connection there. And yet by the time we get to our writers like Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus in the 1st century BCE, there's a real distinction. And the equestrians are not part of that upper echelon of the elite.
Yeah, so this
might be
a retrojection of that.
It
could be. But it could also be that he actually isn't a patrician.
Maybe a little upstart with a lot of cash.
But of course, why stop at consul? Why not aim to be king of Rome? Grain can buy you anything. So he starts to...
This is a man who doesn't know his history.
He starts to plan. He thinks, you know what? I could do this. I could pull this off. It is time, Dr. G, for an evil plan. However, when the elections for the consulship for the next year roll around, his plan isn't quite ready yet.
Oh.
Yeah, so he's not ready to launch into action right at that opportune moment. And the people that he's kind of singled out as being necessary to his plan or potentially useful, they're not necessarily interested in his evil plan.
Oh, wow. Who knew?
Yeah. And that is the end of 440 to me. It's a real cliffhanger.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. Because 440 is a real dud for my source material. First of all, Dionysius of Halicarnassus is just missing. There's nothing. And I had to end up going to Pliny's Natural History, book 18, sections 3 to 4, to have a look into what's going on with this Manius Marcius, who hasn't featured at all in your story, really.
But He will.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay. Well, so because he comes up in this year for me, but then drops off the radar for next year. He's gone by 439. But apparently he's this Adal of the plebs, and he's most famous for what is known as the one modius grain distribution. So we don't have a sense, or at least not in the source material I was able to consult, we don't have a sense that there is a famine yet, but there's definitely some sort of issue with the grain supply because he's selling grain at bargain basement prices as the Adal. And this one modius is considered to be like the cheapest price you could possibly sell it for, really. Right. Any cheaper, and it was like you might as well just be giving it away for free.
Like Spurius Maelius tried to do.
Somebody's in the guy. But so we've got this little section in Pliny where he's talking about the size of land. So, and I think this is just a nice sort of discursus anyway, so I'm going to do it. Sure. But he talks about what is known as a eugurum. So you're like, what's a eugurum? It's a size of a piece of land. And you're like, well, how would we measure a eugurum?
Yeah.
Right, great question. First of all, you have to yoke your oxen. That's step one.
Yes.
Then you have to, in one day, see as much as you can plough. So with that oxen, you can usually go up to a certain point until the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And then you turn them around, and next to it, you do another set down for the rest of the day.
Gotcha, yeah.
And that double stretch
You're doing oxen laps.
Oxen laps, essentially. Yeah. That, whatever you can do in one day with the oxen, and usually you can't make the oxen speed up, so it's considered to be relatively useful, is the eugurum that you'll get granted as your piece of land for then growing your grain.
Right.
So you can do that, and everybody in the population is welcome where possible. That's kind of like the minimum you give people to be able to self-sustain.
Right, okay.
So everyone's on the lookout for their eugurum. Eugurum.
I really don't like the word, but sure.
But this has, this connection to agriculture and all of these sorts of other things, and thinking about, then Pliny gets into like the names that come out of agriculture that are connected to names of families. So Cicero being the famous, the chickpea. Cute. But there are others as well. The Junii receive the name
from the berry?
Well, no. So the Junii receive also the name Bubalus, which comes from breeding oxen and being skilled at it, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's all these kind of like little details that Pliny goes into. Pliny's a great source for like these kinds of things where you're like, what is daily life really like? Let's find out. And then he talks about this cheap grain situation, which is really unusual. And Manius Marcius gets a mention there.
Okay.
And then my only other source for 440 is our old friend Diodorus Siculus.
Ah, yes. Mr. Reliable.
Well, he's having a great time. He gets the names of the consuls right in this instance. So this is book 12, section 36. Gets the names of the consuls right. And he also talks about that during this year, Spartacus, the king of the Bosporus, died after a reign of 7 years.
I like the name.
I thought you might. So I did a little bit more thinking about that. And I was like, oh, we've got a really early Spartacus figure.
Well, it is actually a regal name in some cultures.
Yeah. And this Spartacus is thought to be a tyrant, actually, who overthrows the ruling dynastic line.
Thank God he was forgotten about before the other one came along.
In the Bosphorus. But he starts what is known as the Spartacid dynasty, which lasts for quite a few generations.
Yeah, but there have definitely been people who have theorised that Spartacus, the famous gladiator, may have had some connection to royalty.
Yeah, some sort of royal line.
Yeah. Or it could just be that the name was famous, he wasn't actually from Thrace at all, and they just threw it at him because they were trying to craft him into a Thracian crowd pleaser.
Yeah, and this is the thing, because the speculation in the source is that Spartacus was Thracian, this Bosporus king.
Yeah. But
there's also further scholarship seems to suggest that we might be talking about somebody who's Greco-Scythian. So, yeah, which is not that far away from Thrace geographically.
No, isn't.
Like, if you think about, you've got mainland Greece there, and as you move around, you've got Thrace up here.
Yeah.
And Greco-Scythia is kind of wedged in the...
Wait, isn't Scythia like one of the places where supposedly it's kind of the inspiration for the Amazons might have
it's like
from?
this mythical sort of out there sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's connected to Greece on some level.
Yeah.
So that's 440 BCE.
Look, I appreciate the extra detail. All right, so